My boyfriend never complained once. That's how I almost didn't notice what I was doing to him. We'd been together 11 months when I caught my own reflection in a moment and didn't particularly like what I saw. He was telling me about a game he'd been playing, something with a story he was invested in, a character he'd been following across multiple installments, the kind of an enthusiasm people have when they're sharing something they actually love. I was half listening from the kitchen and I heard myself say ew, still with that stuff in a tone I would have called teasing, and he would have called something else. He went quiet, not hurt quiet, just quiet, and changed the subject. I've thought about that moment a lot since. Here's the thing about assumptions. They don't feel like assumptions from the inside. They feel like pattern recognition, which feels like wisdom, which feels like something you've earned through experience. I'd known a specific type of guy in my early 20s, the anime and gaming type, who used the aesthetic of harmless nerd as cover for attitudes that weren't harmless at all. I'd been on the receiving end of enough of that to file it somewhere and close the drawer. I thought I was being perceptive. I thought I was protecting myself. What I was actually doing was applying a file with someone else's name to a person who had spent 11 months being nothing but kind to me. Dante is gentle in a way that doesn't announce itself. He doesn't make a production of being considerate. He just is, quietly, consistently, in the small ways that accumulate into the actual texture of a relationship. And he remembers things I mentioned once. He asks follow-up questions about my friends. He sat through 3 hours of a fashion documentary I wanted to watch and asked genuine questions afterward. He has never once made me feel embarrassed about anything I cared about. I had been making him feel embarrassed about everything he cared about. I didn't know the full extent of it until we talked. He'd been editing himself for months, downplaying things he was excited about, steering conversations away from his interests before I could react, performing a quieter version of himself because the fuller version kept getting that response from me. He said it carefully, without accusation, which made it land harder than if he'd been angry. He said he was starting to feel ashamed of himself in his own relationship. I sat with that. I explained my history with it, the guys who'd made me uncomfortable, the associations I'd built, the mental shortcut I'd taken that I'd been calling intuition. He said he understood where it came from, and he said it still felt like being judged for a crime someone else committed, which was accurate and which I didn't try to argue with. We were both crying by the end of it, which neither of us had expected when we sat down. I've been thinking since then about the specific cruelty of that kind of dismissal. Not the loud kind, not the obviously cruel kind, but the ew kind, the reflexive kind, the kind that's over in a second and leaves the other person holding it alone while you move on, unaware of the weight you just handed them. It doesn't feel like harm when you do it. It feels like a small opinion, barely worth noting, but opinions delivered consistently in a relationship become the atmosphere, and people breathe the atmosphere of their relationship all day long. And he'd been breathing that one for 11 months. A few days after we talked, I was testing things, gently, not sure what I'd find. He mentioned an anime he'd been watching while working, said it casually, the way you'd mention something only if you've stopped bracing for the reaction. I asked him about it, whether he'd seen it before, whether it was the kind of thing he'd grown up with. He looked at me like he was checking whether I was serious. Then he told me about it. I listened, actually listened. It sounds small. It was small, but I think repair often is. Not one large gesture that cancels everything out, but small consistent evidence that something has actually shifted. He noticed. I could see that he noticed. He didn't make a thing of it, just kept talking. And somewhere in that ordinary conversation I understood that what I'd taken from him wasn't just comfort with his hobbies, but comfort with himself. And that giving it back was going to take time and consistency and the willingness to keep showing up differently than I had before. I want to be honest about something. I came into this relationship with a self-image I was proud of, open-minded, aware, someone who'd done the work of understanding her own patterns. I was wrong about myself in at least one specific way, and I found out because someone who loved me trusted me enough to say so, instead of just quietly adjusting to make room for my blind spots forever. And that trust is not a small thing to receive. I don't think I'm shallow. I think I built a wall around something real and let it do damage without examining it. Those are different problems with different solutions. I'm working on mine. He watched something last night with his headphones in and laughed at something on the screen. I asked what happened. He told me. I asked what happened next. He told me that too.